Alright, hello everybody. So today we have another patron-inspired video, and it is how I clean my guns. So let's get started. Okay, so anybody that's been around my channel for any amount of time probably knows that I am not the biggest on cleaning my guns, at least regularly cleaning my guns. I'm one of those guys that's, if it can't run in the worst conditions possible, I don't want anything to do with it anyway. If I clean my guns, especially pistols and rifles, if I clean them once every 2,000-3,000 rounds, that's probably about average. Maybe a little less, maybe a little bit more. Just depends on how bad it was, how things start to sound, feel, and run, and things like that. In this case, it's been probably 1,000 rounds or more. Maybe close to 2,000 rounds, but at least 1,000 rounds or more since I've cleaned my 19X. So I figured I'll use this one. So according to YouTube, I'm not allowed to show you how to tear the gun down. I'm not allowed to show you how to put the gun together. It doesn't say anything about showing an instructional, so to speak, of me cleaning. It's not really going to be so much an instructional as opposed to just a couple different things that I do and how I lube it and whatnot. And that's really the key for me. For me, it's less about cleanliness and more about lubrication. Many cases, I will take my gun apart, just field strip it, wipe it out just with a rag or a towel, and then put some drops of oil on it, a little bit of grease on the barrel, call it done. Today we're going to do a little bit deeper clean than that. So let's go down here on the kitchen counter, because this is where I clean my guns at. Let's go down here on the kitchen counter and we'll get started. Alright, so I'm not supposed to show you or tell you how to work on guns or tear them apart or anything like that. So I'm not going to show you or tell you anything about that. I'm not going to explain about pulling the trigger, pulling it back a 1/4 inch, letting these down and pulling it apart. So let's look at the inside of this real quick. Let me see if I can keep this in camera. It's not too bad. Not too bad. Got some oil on it. A little bit of dirt, a little bit of grease. Some people are having heart attacks right now. Looking at that, I don't see that as being all too bad. So what I'm going to do first is get some towels, wipe the excess off of all the parts. So I see online quite often I see online people talking about how often do you clean your guns? As somebody will ask in like a forum or a Facebook post, how often do you clean your guns? And of course that post is full of people saying, well, every 100 rounds. Actually, I had a guy on my Palmetto State Armory video, it's funny, where he said that basically he inferred that I was misusing the firearm because in 1,000 rounds or something, I only cleaned and lubed it 3 times. In 1,000 rounds, that I only cleaned and lubed it 3 times. This guy's obviously never been to a 2-day rifle or pistol class. If he thinks 3 times in 1,000 rounds isn't much, that's basically running it dry. That's what he told me. That I was basically running it dry by only cleaning and lubing it 3 times in 1,000 rounds. But there are people out there like that think that every 50 rounds, every box of ammo, these things need spit shined. I am not that person, not in the least bit. So, just taking the excess off here. Alright, so that's pretty good. Get the locking block here a little bit. Now this is normally, that's it. If I clean it this deeply, that's usually a lot for me. And this is what I wiped out of it. On one towel, this is what I wiped out of it. And again, some people I know will have heart attacks about that. So let's check this out. So that's pretty clean. I mean, some people, some people this is not okay for. But for me, that's great. There's some crud down in here. So I'm going to go ahead and get the brush out and some solvents and actually clean this thing a lot more than what I normally would. And in this case, I'm going to use just a brush that came with a cleaning kit and a little bit of rem oil, because rem oil says on the can, proven superior for cleaning. I'm joking. It's a lot of people use rem oil. I'm just making it funny. So I'm going to do that. Spray the brush. Look at how nasty that is. But all that crud is gone. So I'm going to go on to the other side. I like to wipe out the stuff as I go whenever I do it. This is what I call a really deep clean. So again, some of you guys might not consider this being a super deep clean, but for me, this is a super deep clean. Okay, other side, that looks pretty clean. Let's go to back end here, where you guys can see it. Like a painter cleaning out their brush. Alright, so that is all I'm going to do to the frame. I suppose if this was much worse, I would go ahead and pull it apart and actually clean the whole thing out, because I mean there's some soot, there's some crud down in there in the trigger. I'm sure there's a little bit down here in the connector and all that, but the whole thing seems to be pretty, I mean it's clean in there. It's not hanging up or anything. That's my test. So I'm gonna set that aside, wipe the barrel down real quick, just get any of the crap off of it. Now some of you saw the shooter's lube that's in my, or not shooter's lube, the Trigger Fanatics cleaner that's in my range bag. That stays in my range bag. That's for the range. That's in case I need to lubricate something on the range, or clean it out or anything like that. That is not for home use. I know it may seem weird, but as long as I keep that in my range bag and only use it on the range, it'll never go missing in my mind. So, bore snake. If you guys have never used one, go ahead and run the bore snake through it. I saw a guy online one time say that using a bore snake is just as bad as not cleaning your gun at all. It was the most hilarious thing I ever saw from somebody that thought they knew what they were talking about. So just run a couple passes through there, wipe the feed ramp off and this chamber face off. And that is good enough for me. Wipe the spring down. I don't care. And now I'm going to do pretty much the same thing with this. I'm just going to wipe the rails out and swab down in here the channel where the barrel rides. Just make sure there's no crud built up in there. Wipe all these faces off, and that's it. This is the point where I have people freaking out saying, you're not supposed to get oil down in the fucking firing pin, down in the striker channel. Yeah, I probably got a little bit of seepage down in there or something like that. Maybe when I did the face of the firing pin surface or something like that. And I don't care. I really, really, really don't care. I have seen these things dunked in oil and still run. Are you supposed to get a bunch of oil down in there? No. Is it going to render your firearm useless if you happen to get a drop down in there, or a little bit gets on your firing pin because a bristle with oil on it got stuck in there a little bit while you were cleaning? No. Alright, so that is, in my opinion, a clean gun. Now, as I said, lubing to me is the more important part than having it spotlessly white glove clean. As you can see, white glove clean is not in anything even close to what I've done here. So there's 3 things, generally speaking, in my home that I use. This Otis dry lube, hops gun oil, of course rem oil, but I don't really use this as a lubricant. I think it's too thin. And then grease in my grease injector. This grease is made by a company called Superlube, and it's fantastic grease. I also like their oil, but I'm out of it. Their oil comes in a pen about the size of a barrel, and you just squeeze it. Got a little dropper on the end of it. I love their products, Superlube grease and oil. If you get a chance, check those guys out. But it's like some sort of special infused grease, and this is all that I use to lube my AKs with, and this is what I use on the barrels of Glocks in order to try to reduce the Glock smile a little bit. So we're going to start with that. We're going to start with the grease on here. Just a little dab. And a drop of oil in the lock. So that, we'll set that aside. This has plenty of oil on it to lubricate the friction between the slide, or between the rod and the spring, so I'm not touching that. And now we get to the interesting part. This is where everybody agrees or disagrees. This is where people go, well, you ought to look up the what Glock says or whatever. Drop, 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 drop. And then I'll put a drop down in here where the connector is. Alright, usually a drop down here where the trigger is. Then I'll go ahead and put a couple drops in the slide. 1 drop, 2 drops, 3 drops, 4 drops in the slide. 1 right on the safety plunger, and reassemble. Seems to have gone back together just fine. All right, so that's it. Feels good, nice and smooth. No crunchies, nothing like that. Again, I'm usually less concerned about white glove cleanliness than I am about lubrication. Lack of lubrication is what's going to kill any gun, because of friction. Friction happens no matter how good your gun is. So I do try to keep it reasonably lubed, although probably less so than what, again, a lot of people are comfortable with. There's a lot of people that think that, if it looks dry at all, it's got to be lubed up, and it's just not the case for me. It's just not. Now, one thing I didn't show you is the light. You notice I did take the light off from the beginning of the video. These things do get plenty nasty. You can see that the lens isn't so bad, because I wipe the lens regularly. but the bezel is getting kind of blackened. So just a little bit of rem oil on a rag, and I will just wipe this thing down a little bit. And then I will use oil on the lens. Okay, if you keep the lens coated, a lot of people have a lot of different things that they use. There's specially made things, but if you leave the lens with a coating on it, any sort of a film that you can wipe off. I don't care if it's a little bit of rem oil. I don't care if it's just a touch of grease. I'm not afraid to put just a touch of grease on the lens and then wipe off the excess so that there's just a film on it. You can't even tell it's there. But this will make your lens so much easier to keep clean over time while you're shooting throughout your weekend and things like that. Okay, so I hope my patron is pleased with that. The guy who asked me to do that, I have a couple other ideas from them that I'm going to try to get to as well. Because that's what you get when you're a $10 patron. You get to tell me how to run the show, basically. For lack of better words, run the show. I put out my feelers to you guys, and you guys give me ideas and tips and pointers and what you want to see. So that's it. Anybody has any questions, let me know in the comment section. I'll do my best to answer, and we'll talk to you later.